All right. Hi, everybody. This is Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020, and it is the high time in the world for us to be talking about the power of 8 and intention settings and healing our minds, our lives, our hearts, our bodies, and helping each other to do so. My name is Martha Creek, marthacreek.com to contact me, and I'm honored and privileged to have one of the most spiritual, influential people in the world, Lynne McTaggert, here with me today to guide us through this and her scientific research about this. So, Lynne, heartfelt, really inexpressible thanks for you to take the time to do this, for what you've already done, a lifetime achievement of work, and that you're still willing to come in here and sit with us, stir us, prompt us, prod us, impulse us, and call us forward into our potential. So let's go. And thank you, sincerely thank you for this.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Martha.
Now, I want to speak about today, particularly the power of 8 and where that came from a little bit, anything that you will share here, encouragement for people to move this out of theory and out of idea. You know, I have a quote that realizations without application is hallucination.
I love that.
And let's put forward today anything you can about that, the origins of that, the scientific proof for those that would need that, any personal experience, and let's educate then and encourage and inspire people to gather up again and get into these groups, the power of 8.
Okay, so this all happened by, I guess, accidents or some sort of evolution in me. I have a background as an investigative reporter. So I tend to be fairly skeptical, and I don't like unconstructed or unscientific woo-woo. You know, I find that difficult. I always look for proof. So I wanted to know how things like homeopathy work and spiritual healing. Way back in the 90s, I wondered, how come somebody can have a thought and send it to someone else and make that person better? So to find out, I started researching a book that eventually became The Field. And I discovered something really extraordinary, that we're all part of a giant quantum energy field, and also that things like our thoughts are one more energy, and they're not locked inside us, but actually trespassers that go out in the world and affect other people and things. So being the skeptical, hard-nosed journo that I am, I wanted to know how far we can take this. You know, are we talking about just moving a quantum particle, or are we talking about curing cancer with our thoughts? So I set up a thing called the intention experiment. And I figured by then I knew a lot of scientists in consciousness research, and I also knew, had lots of readers because the field was in 30 languages. And I figured I'll just put them together. And when I do, I'll have the biggest global laboratory in the world to test the power of our thoughts. So I didn't really expect it to work, Martha. I thought, well, maybe we'll get a little tiny effect. But it's really worked. I mean, we've run 34 experiments to date, and 30 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. Everything from trying to make seeds grow faster and changing subtle properties of a leaf, to changing the pH of water, to lowering violence, to even healing somebody of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. So all of those things. So I wondered, way back in 2007 and 8, when I was first starting out with the intention experiment and getting some positive results, I wondered if we could scale this down, because I was starting to run workshops, and I thought, well, maybe we can do this on a smaller scale, but I wasn't really sure how to do it. So I'm kicking this around with my husband one night, and I say, oh, I don't know. Maybe I'll put people in groups of 8 or so and have them send healing intention to someone in the group with a health challenge. And my husband says, I love it, the power of 8. He's a very good headline writer. So that's what we did. 2008, one of our first early workshops in Chicago, we had about over 100 people there. We put them in groups of 8 or so. We had them send healing intention to a member of the group with a health challenge. We expected it would be a nice little subtle effect, like having someone rub your back. We had them go home that day and come back the next day and then report on what happened. And again, we expected this to be a mild effect, like what you'd feel when you had a facial. That was not what happened. People came back and said things like this. My knee has been hurting me so much and I walk always with a limp and I'm supposed to get surgery and I'm walking normally today and going downstairs normally with passing steps. I have depression normally and always in a brain fog and it's lifted today. I have terrible IBS and my stomach feels clear. I have cataracts and my sight is 80% better, and on it went. So we were pretty flabbergasted and I didn't really believe it. I thought, oh, this is a placebo effect. So I started doing it all the time when I ran workshops, and one after another, we kept seeing with every workshop I ran, cases of extraordinary healing in 10 minutes. And that's all it took. That's all we allowed because that was the time we used with the intention experiments too. So I was trying to follow that. So it took me a long time to recognize that I had stumbled upon an extraordinary secret sauce in the universe. The fact that groups somehow magnify the effect of intention and can create instantaneous healings.
Well, this is so resonant with me because I can't bear this woo-woo business either. So I love that you would prove it. I can also relate to, I'm going to go out to prove it won't work. I've done so many times to be flabbergasted in a very, very profound way. And I've witnessed some of this to a very small degree, certainly on a very small scale of what you are presenting here. And I believe it's the foundation of this new thought movement and the foundation of these teachings that this is possible without the type of organization that you're talking about and presenting and providing for us, Lynne. So Lynne has provided and is giving free resources, posters, the book, a booklet, a pamphlet, a leaflet, so that you can launch this in your groups. If you are in part of any church, any group, any family. So we've got these resources here that we're going to be bringing forward through all the channels that we can find for for any of you that are listening here or watching this to be able to do this in your own life, in your own circles, by getting 8 people committed, the how-tos, how to sit, how to breathe, how to close your eyes, some examples of specific, very, very concrete, specific ways that you want to heal what you may want to heal. So not like world peace, but peace in Nashville, Tennessee, or peace in a certain city. So let's talk a little bit about that, Lynne, then how important it is. Some of the things you've seen over the years where the groups got a little maybe loosey-goosey or didn't really kind of follow what was put forth, and how important that is as they launch to really follow the protocols as they are for matters of the efficacy and for matters of we want the prime result here. So let's encourage then some to really follow the protocols that you've set forth here based on the scientific proof you've already spoken about and demonstrated.
Yes, and now I went on to write a book called The Intention Experiment, and I studied not only the science of intention, which the book is all about, but also the practices of intention masters, Qigong masters, master healers, Buddhist monks. And I put those together. Many of those groups have different techniques, but they also have certain commonalities. So I put them together as a simple program that everybody could follow. And we use them for the intention experiments, and we use them for Power of 8 groups. And we found that they are highly effective. I mean, I have studied this with scientists. We've studied it in brainwave studies, and I've also studied it over the years, tracking during courses of mine, what's happening with people. Are they getting better? Are they healing not only their bodies, but also their lives, their financial worries, or their career, or their relationships or their life's purpose, and we just track them. I mean, I'll give you an example. Uh, Not long ago, I was speaking at a Mile High church, and we had, a big audience, and I spoke in front of the church, and at the end of it, as I always do, I put people in groups of 8 or so and have them practice it, have them experience it. And in the audience, we had a woman who couldn't even walk on her leg. I mean, she was due for a joint replacement surgery. And at the end of it, she did a giant deep squat. And we had somebody else who healed himself of stage 4 cancer, and someone else who had had a stroke, who couldn't see. She couldn't focus her eyes anymore. She had double vision. And after the 10-minute intention for her, she could see normally again. And somebody else with a dislocation who felt their arms slotting back into place. It was really remarkable. But I guess the one that's taken the cake really was last summer. I was speaking in front of an audience once again, and there was a woman in the audience who'd come in a wheelchair, a young woman who had some strange idiopathic paralysis. Doctors didn't know what was wrong with her, but suddenly, and this is really sad, she's a dancer, she couldn't move from the neck down. So she was paralyzed from the neck down. And so her group did a big intention for her. And honest to God, after it, we asked people to talk about their experiences. When it was her turn to talk about what she'd experienced, she got up, turned around, and started talking to everybody. She could stand and walk. So that to me was just mind-blowing. What I tend to teach all the time, and what I've discovered over the years in teaching many, many master classes on this, is the power of being specific. Lots of people try to throw in and do a mashup of the modalities they've learned. And number one, we don't know what that's going to be, how that's going to work. What I know is over all of these intention experiments and thousands of Power of 8 groups, what works. And being specific is really important. As you say, that's probably the most important thing of all, is when you fashion an intention statement to say what exactly you want. Tell the universe what you want and when you want it. Don't intend, as you say, for world peace. Intend for a specific place. Let the universe know how much you want to reduce violence by or restore peace by. Don't be afraid to mention words like cancer. That's another thing people get wrong all the time. They say, oh, I can't mention the illness because that'll bring it on. Not true. You're asking and use positive words to free yourself or completely overcome or be healed of cancer or whatever it is. But be really specific. What kind of cancer? Do you have any metastases? Mention all of that. Be really specific. That is the most important thing to do. The other thing I should let you know, Martha, is it doesn't have to be 8. As you heard, the title came about essentially by accident. It's a Goldilocks number. It's not too big, it's not too small, but it works with 5, it works with 12. I think more than 12, it gets a little ungainly, and under 5 is not really a group, but all you need is a group.
That's important, I think, because as I felt very intense about follow the protocols and be specific. I'm so glad you spoke about that, because I don't know if that's from my reading from you already, Lynn, but I was aware that 8 is 8 has something else besides it has to be 8. So thank you for speaking it and putting it out here. So any of you that have got 9, fine, 10, fine. So don't let these things stop you from getting at this and organizing yourself to give this a go. So I also today, it seemed important to me, Lynn, to speak about, and you're bound to have heard all of this over all these years, particularly from a woo-woo perspective or skeptics or poo-pooing or whatever. And I've heard some of that too in other modalities, and I've witnessed what you're describing before, and how people describe miracles, what is a miracle, how it's brought forth. and how these other modalities. So I'm glad you brought that in too, because it would seem important to me to at least set those aside for the 10 minutes. Is that what you're referring to? So if they are healing touch modalities or Reiki modalities or whatever, nothing against them, but simply set it aside for this. Is that what you mean by that?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, Martha, we've done a lot of study of Power of Eight groups. And one of the things we did was a brainwave study. I was lucky enough to work with Life University, largest chiropractic university in the world, and they put their neuroscience department at my disposal and said, let's do a study of Power of Eight groups. So we put an EEG cap on one member of one of 7 groups of volunteers. So we had an EEG cap on, one member of each group. And these were all students, just student volunteers who had never done any of this before. And we found that very quickly, as soon as they started doing their intention together as a group, the parts of the brain that involve helping us navigate through space, helping us understand what's me and what's not me. So the parts of the brain that make us feel separate were dialed way down. They're the parts of the brain that sit right here, the parietal lobes, and also the right frontal lobe, parts of the right frontal lobe that are involved with worry, doubt, negativity, they were also dialed way down. So what we had expected to find was brainwave signatures that were exactly like those of meditation, but that's not what we found at all. They were completely unlike those of meditation. They were much more like Sufi masters involved in chanting or Buddhist monks in ecstatic prayer. Both parties, these kinds of groups have been measured by the University of Pennsylvania in brainwave studies, and our brainwave studies were exactly like those. So here's my takeaway from that. Aside from the idea that a Power of Eight group creates a sense, a feeling of ecstatic oneness in its participants, even novice participants like our students who've never even meditated before, but also it's very unlike other things like meditation. So if you try to mash up one kind of technique with another, I have no idea whether or not this is going to nullify the effect. So as you say, nothing against, I love Reiki. I love so many of those modalities, meditation, of course, but don't put them together. Don't try to improve on the simple techniques that I talk about in my book, The Power of Eight, or in my book, The Intention Experiment. Just go with those techniques because I know they work.
Because when I meet skepticism about matters like this, I can't find anything to lose. So there's no reason not to do this. So how do you respond to that? Like, it could be harmful. How do we know that their cancer should end? It's part of their healing lessons, or it's what they've come here to experience or something. So how do you respond to things like,
well, if they want their cancer to end, I think they have the right to ask for that, I think this is a request to the universe. Now, sometimes the universe doesn't give us what we want. It gives us what we need, but I think they have a right to ask. And certainly I have seen one of the things that really works with these groups is that it's not all about you. We always, in the personal development arena, it's all about self-help. And, we learn to just focus and care for the self. Well, my little Power of Eight modality is actually all about other help, because although sometimes it's your turn, you also do intentions for other people. And one of the biggest surprises I found in investigating this, because once it had happened, I needed to double back and try to understand why. And I still do that. I still look at other things that explain to me how this miracle works, how these consistent miracles work. And one of the things I looked into was the science of altruism. And altruism is amazing. It's like a bulletproof vest. I mean, people who do things for other people, no matter how tiny, live longer, happier, healthier lives. And there have even been studies where they've looked at the power of prayer, for instance, to heal depression. There was a psychologist who was also a priest who wanted to see whether prayer could have any effect on depression. I mean, there's a lot of studies of prayer healing physical illness, but he wondered whether it could also heal mental illness. So he had 400 volunteers who were people with clinical depression. He divided them into two groups, had one group receive the prayer and the other group gave the prayer. Now, afterward, he did all these kinds of parameters and study, psychological parameters to determine how they'd done. And he found the people who received the prayer did very well. They were improved, but nowhere near as improved as the people who had given the prayer. And if you look at the science over and over again, you see volunteers live longer. People who have the same illness, who help someone else with the same illness, get better faster. All of that goes on one after another. And in my master classes, I do a year-long Power of 8 Intention master class that starts every February. And I track the people to see how they do. And the first time I did this, I had about 250 people in the class. And almost everybody was beginning to experience incredible results. But a few weren't. And after working with them a bit here and there and doing all kinds of things, I finally just said, particularly, I remember a woman called Andy Spiros. I just said, Andy, get off of yourself. Start intending for someone else. And I had her intend for a young boy who was 15, who'd broken up with his first serious girlfriend and threw himself off a 40-foot structure and nearly died. He broke every bone in his body. And so we started doing an intention visual for him, the whole master class. And Luke got better in record time. I mean, and now he's a healthy 18-year-old. Maybe we did that. Maybe it was healthy doctoring, but it seemed like his healing corresponded with the times we were doing intention, because he had big leaps each time, as reported by his parents. But one of the most incredible things is what happened to Andy after that. Because Andy had been unsuccessfully looking for a job. And although she was a talented marketer and coach, couldn't get anything, needed a job desperately. And as soon as she started intending for Luke, out of the blue, she got this call offering her her dream job. And that has happened over and over and over again with the senders as well as the receivers. So one of the extraordinary things about a Power of 8 group is this rebound effect, this mirror effect, that the senders get healed as well as the receivers. And I think that's the big secret to the whole thing.
I'm so glad you spoke that, because it's something that speaks directly to my heart. And people have asked me over the years, do I still pray? And I'm like, of course I pray, and based on some of the things that they think I believe and teach. And it's because I believe also that I don't know what I can do, but I'm going to put out every intention I have to bring wellness and health and overcoming to people. And I absolutely believe I'm receiving it at the same time. And altruism is a favorite word. So I'm going to feature that now as we put this forward for people that I think could be a bridge for people that may still think this is too far out or far-fetched or whatever. It's not willing, like you and me, to be flabbergasted by something. That I'm gonna use that as a bridge, that for no other reason, if you're into altruism or lifting up or testing things, even a curiosity, be a researcher in this, that'll meet the aspects of some of our humanness in that. So I'm so glad you put that word forward. I also wonder if you, Lynne, today would speak about then anything you've witnessed in the groups where we could address at the front of it, where groups get a little wily or need a little reeling in or a little aligning. So what could we say if we were speaking, for example, to the facilitators or the people who take that role? How could we encourage them?
Okay, well, that's what I teach. I teach a lot of this in my courses, and I I have levels of intention too. I've got a basic level 1, and then the master class 2. And what I tell all of the groups is to be very organized about it, to have a facilitator. You can have other people like a timekeeper or something like that. Generally, I suggest don't try to get around all 8 or so people each time. And first of all, you can meet in person, but these days with all of us in lockdown and social distancing, it has always worked just as well virtually. Remember my master classes. I put people into groups according to their time zone. And also, thousands of people have joined groups on my forum, or I've got a Facebook page that I set up during COVID called Connecting and Healing Through the Power of 8, where people just advertise for people in their time zone. And we put people into groups like that in the same time zone. But in most instances, they've never met. They meet virtually on Zoom, like we're meeting today. I have groups that have been meeting for years. And these are their intention family. They're closer to these people than they are to some of their own relatives, and yet they've never, ever physically met. Yeah. So it works just as well. The healings and all of the kinds of things that go on work just as well. Nominate a leader. Organize your intention statements together. So you need to decide on them as a group together, and make sure to make them specific, put in who it's for and when you want it and exactly what you want it for, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot more explanation about this and the techniques in my book, The Power of 8, or the Intention Experiment. These are the highlights. And you all essentially need to hold that together and just start doing simple things like breathing together. The other tip I want to give you is it doesn't go out of your head. You send it out from your heart. And you just hold that person in your heart. And the receiver just needs to open up their heart and receive. So it's really important. This is the other aspect of it. This is an altruistic activity. It's a group activity. So sometimes when I put master classes together, I get people who say, oh, I don't like this person or that person. Well, that's a point too. That's the point too. One of the things that's really important about a lot of the work I teach is getting along with everybody, getting along with people who are not like you. And part of the bridge that allows the heart to reach across the fence is this Power of 8 group. You get to feel so close to people. You are connected in this ecstatic oneness, essentially what is a mystical experience, and it will change you forever, so that any of those little differences don't matter anymore.
Well, amen to that. And that's my encouragement. If you've never overcome cancer, you have had community, heart energy, peace of mind, being cared for, nurtured, bolstered up, prayed for, regardless of what the outcomes are. So it's like, at least give yourself that. And that's medicine comes in many forms. So
well, my Power of 8 group is currently meeting every week for a member of one of our friends who has stage 4 prostate cancer. It moved to his bladder and his spine. And the doctors think it's a miracle now. I mean, he's going through an integrative treatment of very light dose chemo with a lot of other things, vitamin C and the whole 9 yards of alternative treatment too. But even so, the doctor has never seen this kind of quick response. I mean, his PSA went from well over 100 to 6 in a matter of a few weeks. So he's doing fabulously. And he also says that the group sets him up for the entire week. When we meet in the beginning of the week, he feels set up for the entire week. He just receives this extraordinary love. So the transformational capacity of doing this for someone else is just extraordinary. But it's also for you. I mean, one of my favorite stories is a guy called Wes. who participated in one Power of Eight group I set up for a church. And he just volunteered to be part of it. He wanted to put himself forward as the receiver because he'd suffered from terrible depression ever since he had been drafted for the Vietnam War. So he was 65 when I met him and was going to be a doctor or a biochemist, was in the middle of going to college. And he got drafted at the point where they weren't giving college deferments anymore. So it was so traumatic for him going that he never finished college, and his life just spiraled in this downward spiral. Even meeting the love of his life didn't last long, his second wife, because she died of a fast-growing cancer. So he lost her, lost his house. And by the time I met him, he'd kind of got to this horrible depressive state of what's the use. So he wasn't a receiver, he was a sender to a woman who had stage 4 cancer in that group. But after it, he had this extraordinary thing happen to him, this extraordinary mystical experience, so that the next day, he said it was like the grass was greener, everything smelled, the flowers smelled better than he'd ever smelled them. You know, his senses were super heightened. He was much friendlier. Something had majorly changed. But then that night, he went to sleep and had this extraordinary transformative dream where he imagined being back in college, meeting his 19-year-old self, who essentially communicated to him, "Don't worry, there's still time." And something in that extraordinary encounter changed his life. So he kind of woke up that next day. You remember Scrooge waking up on Christmas Day and he's suddenly effusive and handing everything out to everybody? Well, that's exactly what Wes was like. He changed dramatically. Suddenly went from hardly being able to get up in the morning to being really motivated to do exercise, 90-minute power walks, and getting involved in new courses to study and being part of his church and active again. And all of this happened as a result of one Power of Eight group when he was a sender, not a receiver. So that's the transformative power of this. It's just amazing, of being part of something where you feel this, you get to glimpse oneness. And I think that's the big transformation.
And I think that's such an important part, particularly right now. And you've spoken about that, and I did in a newsletter a couple of months ago about this caution about isolation and the psychological effects of that, and the need to do that now for depending on what you believe, and the importance of not doing that. So this also addresses that this chance that while we're more internal, maybe more inside, that we're using this technology and this global family, this global laboratory to reach out and find ways to do this. And so if for anybody that wants to make it global and to find people around the world to do it, Lynne has just provided us a way to do that. All of this information is available at lynnmctaggert.com, and all the resources, the books, the templates, the flyers. And I'm certainly going to be putting this out to all the groups that I can, certainly through the New Thought channels and other ways. So you've got all the resources in the world. I'm going to be involved I'll get involved straight away with this training myself for February next year, and encouraging other people to do that. And I'll be starting some of my own groups in the fall this year, in October, November, December timeframe. So those of you that are curious and following along with marthacreek.com, there'll be a way for me to organize something on a much smaller scale, but a beginning scale and a powerful scale, a mighty scale. And that we want to continue, Lynne, if you can then, with folks, what would this healing, to speak about healing in terms of, in this case, you've given very, very clear, demonstrative, visual, factual examples. Mm-hmm. What could you say about healing takes many forms, and that they may not could report, I still can't walk, or maybe I couldn't stand up out of my wheelchair, but I feel different about life, or I feel different about my future, or I feel happier in my heart, or something like that. So I want to put forth a little encouragement not to get too caught up on what healing actually is or isn't, that would stop somebody from keeping their experiment going or keeping their group going, because they may not get these profound, clear visual ways of healing. Would you speak to that?
Sure. I mean, first of all, everybody uses it for a different reason. Many of the people who come to my courses want to heal their finances, for instance, or want a new career. They're tired of their career. They want something new, or they want to pursue a hobby, or they want to heal a relationship or form a new one, or they are sort of entering a new phase and they want a new life purpose. And they're looking for that too. A lot of people come looking for instance, the third act or something else where they want to change their life purpose. Maybe they had a certain purpose up to now, but that's finished and they want to change and they're not sure what it is. And I've found a Power of 8 group seems to work really well for all of that. I mean, first of all, the easy wins. Lots of people with financial difficulties do intentions. And here's the interesting thing. When their group tries to intend for a huge amount, like I've had groups where they all say, well, we all intended to win the lottery. And I usually will say to them, oh, is that how much money you need? You mean you needed 13 million? And they said, well, no. John needs 20,000 to buy a car, and Jane needs 12,000 to send her daughter through school, and so forth. I said, well, why don't you just intend for what your group needs? Because that's exactly what you need, and maybe you're more likely to get it. And I found over and over again, people who have a certain amount that they put out that they need, not some idealized amount that they think they ought to have, but what they really need, the universe oftentimes provides it with bank refunds. We've had somebody who got a bank windfall they didn't expect. Another woman down to her last $200. And she gets this letter from Lloyd's of London, where she had worked years before, saying, you're entitled to a special grant. And she gets enough money to set up this whole other business. And so forth. Somebody else was $2,320 overdrawn and finds out that a hotel overcharged her for just that amount. You know, those are the kinds of things that happen. But I also see people healing relationships when they deep dive into this process. Something about them changes and it seems to radiate out. Even the participants of our intention experiments, I survey them afterward to find out what happened to them. And over again, I hear about half of the people say, I'm more in love with everyone I come into contact with. They're hugging strangers, basically. So something in them transforms and it has a knock-on effect in their relationships. So we find that, and even if they don't heal a relationship, as you say, they find a contentment and a love that they feel for humanity that changes their whole demeanor. Same with life purpose. Somehow, getting and spending isn't quite so important anymore. They want something deeper, with deeper meaning, because they've experienced something mystical, some sort of feeling of extraordinary oneness. So that a lot of petty stuff just falls away.
So these words, the key words today that I hope and know and intend that any of you listening have had a spark, that you've got a spark to an emotional aspect of yourself, an intellectual aspect of yourself, a physical aspect, and that you then are being impulsed toward this in the waving the flags of altruism, healing, overcoming, becoming, purpose, deep dives, and to know that the support for this and beyond is here for you on the shoulders of leaders like you, Lynne McTaggert, and what you've done for a lifetime. So thank you sincerely again for this time, for your work, your consciousness, your heart, the way that you hold data, and the way that you can bring this forth that is bound to clear out some of that yeah but of our lower instinctual mind. That it's been a brilliant way to do that today. So
thank you so much.
I join you. I continue to, and we'll lift this up and stay in touch so that we can keep sharing these powerful outcomes. And
wonderful. Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. And for anybody who wants to find out more about me or my courses, I've got a new intention course starting in October. Just check me out on lynnmctaggert.com.
Please do that. So no more waiting. Get over there and get enrolled in that. Everybody, go do that. Imagine what we can do, particularly in this time when we come in to give, to be part of this giving, what we can be part of history even, I believe. So, all right, till we meet again.
Thank you so much, Martha.
And for you.
Take care.
All blessings.
Bye.
Bye. MarthaCreek.com if I can support you. Blessings.